So this is the last round of my tournament in Germany, and I'm paired up against Alexander Schultz, a 2009 rated player. And I didn't have any specific preparation for this game, but my general preparation for this entire tournament, having studied enough openings, non-specific openings, I felt like I was doing pretty well in the opening. So I had like no concerns about that. And I think that if you're a Sicilian player, specifically who plays the second move 96 against 93, I think that you're gonna be very happy to see this kind of novel variation happen on the board, because I definitely was. Anyways, I'll just get right into it and show what happened in the game. My opponent played e4 here, and I played c5. And in this tournament, in the first round, my opponent played knight f3, after which we entered a classical Sicilian. In the third round, my opponent played the Moscow after knight f3, d6, and bishop b5 check. But in this game, my opponent played the move knight c3, which I was very happy to see, because I made a video actually on the Sicilian Grand Prix for Black, like 2 weeks before this game happened. And so I was really hoping that he would play the Grand Prix. And so after I played the move knight c6, of course there are moves like g3, which is the close Sicilian, or the move bishop e5, which are fine. But my opponent plays f4, and I was like ecstatic to see this on the board, because I had like some very specific preparation for this based on the video. And so after I played the move g6. Now the point is that we need to understand that white doesn't play the move, knight f3 and then pawn to d4, meaning that they kind of lose control over the d4 square. And so what that means is that black can instead fight for control over it with a move like bishop g7, and maybe stick a knight on d4 later. So my opponent plays knight f3, bishop g7, and now there are two main moves, which is the move bishop c4, which after e6, the main move is f5, but black is doing very well after gf5. Black is close to winning, genuinely, or like has a very nice advantage here already. So yeah, instead my opponent plays the best move here, bishop b5, and seeing that I don't want to allow bishop takes c6, I play the move knight d4, which is the main move. And white typically castles here, which is what happened in the game. And from this position, the main moves are either knight takes b5, which I talk about in the video, or the move a6 here. And they both lead to equality, but I feel like it often can lead to like a very dry game. So I did quite a bit of analysis on this very rare move, f5, and I managed to get it on the board, which I was very happy to see, because this has only been played once according to the League Chess Masters database. And I first found out about this move when Pragnananda played it against Ariantari in 2021. And even though he lost that game, he actually managed to get a slight advantage from the opening. It's just that he didn't manage to handle the position like the best way, which is understandable, because this is quite a rare variation to see on the board. Now, first off, the point is that black is challenging white's center, and so if you take on f5, black can take on f5 with the knight here, and the point is that you're still maintaining control over the d4 square while actually removing one of white's pawns that was controlling the center. So I think black is doing quite well here. Instead, my opponent plays the principled move e5, after which first off, there's a potential threat of knight takes d4, because it disconnects my bishop, and so I play a6 here. This is still part of my preparation, and bishop c4 is definitely the most logical move, because it stays on this diagonal, but it does allow the potential b5. Now, I play the move e6 here, which is very important to shut down this bishop. And from this position, actually, after the game, my opponent discussed that he's never seen this move f5 before, which is understandable. But he considered different options. Like, for example, what if he plays the move pawn to d3? But I considered the move d6 very strong. And the thing is that it's actually very much possible here to just ignore what's happening on e5. So, for example, I believe a move like bishop e3 would be fine. And the point is that if I take on e5, they can play knight takes e5 and have a nice knight in the center. Though I believe that after knight e7, b5 maybe even immediately would be quite strong, like bishop e3, knight e7, and I figured this position would be quite good for me. But of course, white has their trumps, like for example, the knight on e5 here is kind of a bit annoying, but yeah, that's definitely possible. But instead, he considered knight takes d4, cd4, and knight e2, and this pawn sacrifice is also possible, fe5. And if I take on e5, potentially I'm not exactly sure, but a move like c3 here looks quite interesting, just trying to fight for control over the center. And I figured that this would be quite, it provides some interesting compensation. So 97 would be a very solid move, just to, I believe, maintain a slight edge. For example, c3, knight c6. And maybe e5 is falling, and I'm still controlling d4. Overall, if I, in this opening, if I control the d4 square, then black is doing generally quite well. So that's the general idea. They also consider knight takes d4, but after c takes d4 and knight e2, I can again go for this move d6. Now, if they move, if they move like a pawn to c3, I can just take on e5 easily with a pawn up. But if they play knight takes d4, then I can always take on e5. Now, if they play knight takes e6, then this is quite simple. Queen b6 check wins the bishop. But if they play knight f3, it's funny because in the post-mortem analysis, we actually entered this position, but with the move pawn to d3 included. Now, with the move pawn to d3 included, it makes my next move e4 not possible. But in this position, it simply wins because I have the queen d4 check coming in, picking up the bishop. So yeah, it's funny because in the postmortem we had d3 included, which we kind of set up the board wrong, which provides white with an okay game. But in this position, black is simply winning. So yeah, a4 was played in the game, which is definitely the best move, just preventing any potential b5. And so I played the move pawn to d6 here. Now this is the point. I'm undermining the center, and white has a couple of options. I thought a5 was the best move according to my analysis, to my prior analysis, and it reaches some quite forcing variations after pawn to d5, bishop e2. I can play knight e7, and then my analysis according to that video was takes, knight a4, queen takes a5, and then this move either pawn to c3 or pawn to b4. And the point is after takes, they can go c3. And taking here would be quite dangerous. For example, dc3, queen a5, bishop a3, and white gets really active here, with here, queen b3 maybe coming, and it's, I don't want to really take this pawn, so c3, queen a5, let's say queen b3, and then b5. And the point is that even though they play knight c5, I don't really want to take this guy because bishop b2 simply traps my queen. Bishop a3 actually traps my queen. And white is getting supremely active there. So instead, queen b6 is best. But after c takes d4 and rook a7, because I want to get away from this potential threat of bishop takes b5 with check, making use of this of my rook on a8 being undefended. So I play rook a7, for example. And this is a very interesting middle game. Black is certainly not worse, but yeah, it's it's very interesting because black is up a pawn and white needs to move the compensation here. But if you haven't ever seen this before, this is like a crazy position. Like what is even happening in this position? Like black is up a pawn, but this knight on c5 is good. White's bishop here, both sides have the bishop here, but they're both both sides are kind of blocked in the position. So yeah, it's hard to evaluate this from a human perspective. Though objectively it does give equal chances. Instead, knight takes d4 is also possible, but this just transposes to here, and then white can definitely sacrifice a pawn with this variation, but in general, black is doing quite well. So instead, my opponent takes on d6, and after queen takes d6, now this is my point. I've undermined their center. Now I have some nice control over the center, and I'm gonna continue with knight e7 next. I'm gonna keep my bishop to defend this pawn on e6, and overall, if my e6 pawn is not that big of a weakness because it's defended by enough pieces, then white is just simply stuck with less space because they're unable to push pawn to d4. So my opponent plays d3 here, and I play knight e7. And this is still following the game. And according to the previous game played by Tari, he played knight e5, which after the improvement over the game b6, black would just get a slight advantage here with not even bishop b7 because you want to keep this bishop defending this pawn, but moves like either knight c6, you can even keep the, you can even castle here, and eventually if you get rid of this knight on c6, on e5, then it's what is the point of knight e5 to begin with? It doesn't really untangle white's position. So instead, knight takes d4 was played, which is interesting because I didn't analyze this move, prior to the game. But I saw that the point is that if I take on d4, which is with the pawn, which is generally what I want to do, they go knight b1, and maybe some castles and then b3 followed by bishop a3 was a bit annoying. So I figured I don't want to let this bishop roam free, so I decided to take on d4 after a good more than 5 minutes here, I took on d4, just making sure that this diagonal doesn't stay open. And after king h1, now I play the kind of careless move castles here. Now, I didn't know this during the game, but apparently castles is wrong only because there's a better option. The point is that I can simply castle long in this position, which, for example, if they go for knight b1, trying to reroute the knight to d2, also maybe playing c3 next, I can play the move knight d5. And it becomes really hard for white to play knight d2 because there's always the threat of knight e3. And also, I just want to simply castle long, play bishop c6, and later open up lines against the white king. For example, I can go for rook g8 and g5, or even the immediate g5, and overall, I just get a really nice attack here. And if they play a move like a5 here, trying to get the knight maybe to a4, I can castle long, they play knight a4, and then again this move knight d5, trying to cover the b6 square. And after, let's say, c3, I drop the bishop back to f6, let's say they play queen b3, but I simply play king b8 here, and I have really nice prospects for an attack here with, like, you know, bishop c6, rook g8, and g5 again. And at the same time, even if white plays knight to d4, knight to b6, what is the knight even doing there if I'm not, you know, creating any weaknesses or any tactical opportunities? So black is doing very well here. So bishop d7 is definitely an idea that I need to consider next time. But castles here is what I played. Generally, like the in positions that I've analyzed, either the move king f7 or castles have always been played. So like I figured castles was an automatic move. And so they go knight e2 here. Now potentially best is the move knight b1, trying to go to d2, also preparing knight c3. But of course, like I can continue with knight d5 here, or even play b6 and bishop e7, and, you know, get a fine position. After king h1 and castles, though here genuinely, like, I was very happy to see this during the game because I thought, like, I really couldn't figure out like a great plan for white to untangle their pieces, specifically this bishop on c1, which is kind of, you know, stuck here. So they play knight e2 here. I dropped the bishop back to f6 because I consider bishop g7 possible, but I figured bishop f6 does the same job of, you know, simply retreating, but it also takes control of some extra squares like g5. It gives my king some extra room, so bishop f6 looks very natural. And now my opponent's idea of knight g1, which is very interesting. And the point is that they want to bring the knight to f3 so that it controls e5, which is definitely a good idea. Now I continue with bishop d7, connecting my rooks. They continue with the plan of knight f3. But here, I really should have considered the move pawn to b5. Now, I didn't play this during the game because I figured that after a move like bishop b3, I want to keep the idea of this bishop staying on this diagonal. But actually, you know, like I explained before, this bishop actually belongs on d7 so that it controls the sensitive e6 pawn. So instead, I figured the b5 was a bit, you know, loose on my position, but it really was best. Instead, I play knight c6 here, which just controls the e5 square. And yeah, but it does remove the possibility of b5, so I should have considered that. My opponent plays bishop d2, potentially preparing bishop c3, which I thought of. But I continue with rook e8. And my idea here is eventually to go for e5. And okay, first off, of course, I can't take on b2 because rook b1 just picks up my b7 pawn. But so they play the interesting move rook a3. And yeah, generally, like after rook a to e8, I figured that my position was just like slightly better here. But it was difficult from a practical perspective to like find a good plan. But rook a3 was definitely an interesting try. Now, what I should have done in the game was played a move like king h8, which has the same purpose as the move I played in the game, which is king g7. Because my idea is to get the king unpinned and try to go for e5. But on h8 it's actually much safer. I figure that g7 is kind of a bit more active, so why not go here? But I genuinely didn't see much of a difference between king g7 and king h8, so I kind of played it. But in hindsight, yeah, just like this move, even though it doesn't seem like there's much difference, my opponent's next move is very clever. They play the move queen c1, and it shows that the idea of playing pawn to e5 is not really possible here, because if I play e5, then because my unfortunate placement of my king, they just go for bishop h6 here and pick up an exchange. The rook is gonna fall. So I realized that, oh, okay, I made a slight inaccuracy here, but it shouldn't be so bad. So I played rook f7, which is interesting. Trying to go for rook to e7 and try to, avoid any bishop h6 checks, and then go for e5 next. So my opponent plays a5, and what I should have done in the game is just play queen c7. Okay, I'm kind of a bit going into like too many tangents, I believe. But the point is, I play what my intention was to play, play rook e7, but I didn't even realize how annoying this rook on b3 was. I figured that, okay, like this is such a strange maneuver that it can't be good. But surprisingly, this move rook b6 is very strong. I end up playing the move bishop c8 here, just defending the pawn. I figured that this is no problem, but my opponent plays rook b6, and I can't play e5 first off. And the thing is that after queen c7, my opponent played rook e1. Surprisingly, after this sequence, they can just go for knight e5 and just potentially sacrifice a pawn. For example, I want to kind of like, walk away from any bishop h6 checks, so I just play the move king h8. But in this position, white could play the very strong move knight e5. Now, the point is that I can't take on e5 twice, because they can just play rook e5, and suddenly I lose my queen because the bishop is on this diagonal. And if I go for bishop g7, then I'm simply worse. Like, what are my rooks doing even? So both me and my opponent missed this opportunity for white to just potentially sacrifice a pawn. But I feel like the psychology of the position kind of favored me, because throughout the game he probably thought that I was like surprised out of the opening, and like I have some nice control over the center. So I figured that black is doing quite well. But surprisingly, after knight e5, white is just simply much better here. It's not even close. But I think the psychology of the opening, just kind of pointed my opponent to to play this kind of slow move h3, just giving the king some luft. But I ended up playing bishop g7 here, and again knight e5 is very much possible here. But they missed the opportunity and play the move queen d1, which allows me to play e5. Now the thing is that this doesn't even solve all my problems, which, it's funny because in the fourth round when I played against the French defense, my opponent and I thought that I was much better throughout the game, but computer analysis showed that actually they could hold, and we both misunderstood the position on a fundamental level. And it's exactly the same situation as here, because both me and my opponent thought that I was better, but that's simply not the case. Now, my opponent, I think, went a bit on autopilot mode and didn't consider enough candidate moves, and they took on e5. The thing is that they can play the move bishop d5, and the threat of bishop takes c6 is very annoying. And if I ever take on f4, let's say, they can trade it on e7. Okay, let's say knight e7 is possible, but let's just say rook e7 looks natural. But now let's say bishop c6, ruining the pawn structure, and the queen c1. And surprisingly, I can't even defend f4. I have no defense against the pawn on f4 dropping. I have a bad structure, and white is much, much better. So instead, maybe knight b4 is possible, but they continue with bishop e3. I play e4, but again, they go for this typical, very thematic move, knight e5. And with the knight on e5, this is quite dangerous for me even. So instead, they took an e5, which allowed my pieces to kind of roam free. After takes. Okay, the point is that if they ever go bishop f4, I have the very nice move knight f3. Okay, if they take on e7, I can take with the queen first off, but also, rook e7 is possible, I think. Queen e7 here. Let's say queen f3. Figure this position is good. Let's say here, bishop d4. I think this is simply winning even with bishop d4 coming. But instead, my opponent plays knight takes e5 here. And after rook e5, we trade a bunch of pieces. I get my queen active. And from this position, my opponent played the move bishop c3. And a best move here, which I thought they would play, is the move queen f3, which I figured that we could enter this endgame after queen e2. But this is just a bad move. After takes, I thought this position was much better for me, because potentially the c3 pawn, the c2 pawn is dropping. But after bishop f4, these bishops are so much better than my bishops. And I can't even take on c2 here, because rook d6 simply wins on the spot, because of this rook is this rook just activates and my king is just dead. So surprisingly, the rook this rook went on a complicated maneuver all the way to b6, which ended up being very useful in the endgame. So I didn't even realize this, the strength of this move rook, this rook maneuver to b6, but it was very clever by my opponent, genuinely. But here, yeah, bishop c3 was played instead, and I played the move queen g3. And my opponent here could have gone actually for two moves that would have been equal. Either the crazy looking move rook f3. The point is that of course I can't take because this would be funny checkmate. And if I play f4, they can play this another stunning move. Like, I don't really want to show this for instructive value, but I want to show because this is like a crazy variation. Now, of course, I cannot take on e2 because it leaves the back rank exposed. And after rook f8, this is simply checkmate because this bishop is in a pin. So, yeah, for example, I have to play the move queen e3, an only move. After queen e3, fe3, rook f1, I can play bishop d4. We enter this liquidation, which eventually ends up to an equal position like this. Which, of course, like none of us saw this during the game, but it's very much possible. Another possible move is simply queen d2, maintaining control over the long diagonal and preventing any, potential invasion on the back rank. I could play bishop e5, and after king g1, king g7, this is an equal position, but it's, of course, still very, very complicated. Anything could happen here. But instead, my opponent plays the blunder here, which is the move queen f3. And immediately I saw the opportunity to win here. But I took I really took my time here to calculate all of the complications. And if you want, you could try to find the best move in the position. So yeah, the move that I calculated here, and all of I made sure I checked twice and I checked 3 times to make sure that this sequence worked. But I simply play rook e1 check. Very beautiful move. Now, of course, this is checkmate if they don't take, or they play rook queen f1. So now they have to take, king h2 is the only move. And the point is that if I play bishop e5, then simply g3 and I have nothing. Like there's no attack here. So I played the move bishop d4, and suddenly the white king is simply getting mated. Like after I considered h4 the most challenging option, but once I saw the next move on the board, okay, first off, bishop g1 is winning on the spot. Because king h3, f4 simply wins with a nice check. Like bishop e6 you have to play, but then I just take and just I'm gonna be up a piece. They're gonna have to take on e6 here. But yeah, in this position I saw that after h4 I had the very nice move even f4, which doesn't win as much as the previous as playing bishop g1 and then f4. But still, once I saw this move, this very nice, simple and calm move, I saw that this is game over. The point is that if you take on f4, besides bishop g1 just being checkmate in 3 moves, bishop e5 is also just winning the queen. And so I stopped my calculations there, and I saw that after their next move, which is c3, okay, this simply walks into checkmate in 3 moves, and my opponent resigned in this position. So for my end, I thought that I played a very, very nice game. But of course, there are so many improvements that could have been made. My opponent actually had the advantage at some point, but the game definitely didn't feel that way because I think we both missed a lot of chances. So yeah, I definitely need to make sure that doesn't happen again in this variation. But yeah, I'm very happy to see when it's one of the best feelings when your preparation that you worked at home, you worked on at home just comes on the board. And it's actually very nice in this position. The nice thing is that I can play a quiet move. I mean, it's kind of quiet because it's not with a check or anything. This move bishop d4 is because I'm taking control of all the checking squares on this diagonal, and there is no possibility to enter the back rank. So because of these two factors, it's very nice that I'm able to launch a quick mating attack. And yeah, I end up I gained a lot of points in this tournament. I think I gained 39 points overall, despite my first round loss. Very close to 2,000. And I ended up getting shared first because everyone had the most, 8 players in total in this category ended up with 4 out of 5. But on tie breaks, I believe I ended up at 7th place. So yeah, which is not the best, but basically it's shared first. That's what I'm gonna say, because we all ended up on 4 out of 5. It's all just about tie breaks and stuff. But yeah, very happy with the end of this tournament, and I ended up. This is as you can see, some footage of me on stage accepting the prize with a total of 7 other players. and I didn't end up getting a prize money, because I was there was like a draw between me and the shared seventh player, basically, between who will get the prize money of like a couple €100. But instead, the kind people from this chess company from Germany allowed me to like take one book. So I ended up taking Shanklin's book on mastering pawn play, for free, which is very nice of them. And so, yeah, that basically concludes this my coverage of this tournament that I played. I'm very happy with the results. Even though my first round loss happened, it's like I felt like I learned a lot from that game, and I definitely overcame a lot of prior problems psychologically when I played in tournaments in the past. Because I think in the past, like, I had problems seeing the board correctly. I had problems calculating very cleanly. But in this tournament, overall, I'm quite happy with my calculation. I might have missed some things, but overall, it was quite good. So, yeah, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope if you are a Sicilian player, you could use some of this analysis against this Grand Prix. I can highly recommend this approach of playing the move pawn to f5 so early on. I think this is very sound and yet very combative. So, and also like a very big surprise weapon. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. So, I'll see you next time. Bye.